The gong, believed to have originated in Western Asia, reached China in the 6th century, where it continues to be used for a wide range of purposes, including as a military signal, a rhythmic accompaniment for vocal performance, and a ritual instrument. This question. Okay, so let's break this one down. The first thing we should do is let's just get rid of choices that don't work in the sentence at all for whatever reason. So let's see. Wide range of purposes, which includes. So we can get rid of C because notice includes is singular. And at the very least, we want it to be include because we're talking about purposes, right? That's the noun that's being replaced by the which is plural, so our verb must be plural. So we can definitely get rid of C. We could also get rid of E because it creates a comma splice, where it continues to be used for a wide range of purposes. They include as blah, blah, blah. We're starting a new sentence. Can't do that with just a comma. So C and E are gone. Now, what about the original? The original sentence, it sounds a bit strange on first read, especially if you read it to yourself. If you read it out loud, maybe it doesn't sound as weird, but let's see. Where it continues to be used for a wide range of purposes, including as a military signal, a rhythmic accompaniment, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so sounds a bit weird. Let's see what the other choices are. So which include. So you might think, okay, I can put which include here instead. The which refers back to the purposes, and these purposes include a military signal, a rhythmic accompaniment. Okay, well, maybe. What about D? Including. So we could also just, instead of the which include, we can use including. So, right, these purposes that are including a military signal, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. If you think B is right, then you have to think D is right as well, because B and D are more or less indistinguishable. They would both be grammatically correct. If one is right, the other would be right. So immediately this should give you pause, because we can't have two right answers, right? Can't be both B and D. So that must mean, by the logics of it, that B and D must be wrong, and that in fact A is the answer. And it actually turns out A is indeed the answer. Why? So you might think, so grammatically speaking, which include and including is fine. Structurally, there's no problem. It's not a comma splice, it's not a run-on, it's not a fragment, it's fine. The issue is with really the definitions of words. We're talking about purposes, and we can't say a purpose is a military signal, right? We can't say the purposes include, write it this way, the purposes include a military signal. Just break it down to that. A military signal is not a purpose, right? You can use something as a military signal. That would be a purpose. But a purpose is not a military signal itself. So B and D both make that error. They make it seem like that these things, a military signal, an accompaniment, and an instrument, a ritual instrument, are purposes, but they're not. Now, so that's why we can get rid of B. That's why we can get rid of D. So why does A work? Well, if you think about it, what is the purpose? The purpose is being used as a military signal. The purpose is as a military signal, as a rhythmic accompaniment, as a ritual instrument, right? Those are purposes. You use them as something. And in fact, we can see it completes with idiom, right? Where it continues to be used for a wide range of purposes, right? We can imagine just getting rid of this and completing the sentence, where it continues to be used as a military signal, a rhythmic accompaniment, and a ritual instrument. We need this as here to show that they're purposes. So we can't just use which include or including, because these things are not purposes, right? They're objects. If you use them as those, that's a purpose, but you can't just use the noun in itself. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. I think the best thing to see is if you think B works, then you must think D works as well, because they both pretty much be equivalent, and that means none of them work, because you can't have two right. So A would have to be the default on that one. And if you want to know why, well, it has to do with the as. You have to use something as something, right? Use something as something. So therefore, you need to have the as here to complete the idiom. This is a really, really tough one. Here's actually an example about knowing the difficulty of the question. Knowing the number would help you. So for instance, if this were number 14 in the 14 question section, you would know that it can't be straightforward. So B and D would look too straightforward for a question like a number 14. If this were number 1 or somewhere in the mediums, okay, I probably would feel pretty comfortable with those two choices, assuming they were grammatically correct, which they are, or assuming they were correct, which they aren't in this case. But we'd feel more comfortable with a more straightforward answer if it was an easy or medium. If this were labeled a 14, we would know it'd have to be tricky, and that might make us lean away from the more seemingly obvious choices like B and D, because A is going to turn out to be the answer. This is a very, very tricky one. Don't worry so much about it, because frankly, I haven't really seen something this tricky on a real SAT in a really long time. But just understand when you're looking at comparisons or when you're looking at things being included, you have to make sure it's almost like a noun agreement error, that the nouns agree, that they're both the same type, like a comparison error almost too. So just keep that in mind. All right, so this one's A.